Networking and marketing made simple is for you, the business owner who has a product, a service, or a message that you believe in. My name is Scott Aaron, and each week we'll take a behind-the-scenes look into the real-world marketing and networking tactics and strategies for getting what you have in front of you to a lot more people. Thanks for spending time with me, and now let's get started. Super excited to announce that this podcast episode is actually sponsored by Spotify for podcasters. And I've talked about this before, and you're listening to this podcast for a reason. Maybe you want to make a podcast, and Spotify has its own platform that lets you create and make your own podcast super, super easy, but then have the ability to distribute it everywhere, and you can even monetize it and earn money. And it's all in one place for absolutely free. And again, it's called Spotify for Podcasters. And just to give you kind of the ins and outs of how it works, it lets you record, edit from your phone or computer, and there's no real confusing aspect to how it's done. So you can set it up very easily and literally start creating your podcast today. Then you can distribute it on Spotify and everywhere else. Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, everywhere, iHeartRadio. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. So again, and if you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, you can do Q&A, you can do polls, you can really build a lot of engagement. And with Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads like this, podcast subscriptions, and so much more. And best of all, again, it's totally free with no catch. And ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, again, it's helped my business grow. I've monetized it. I'm approaching 500,000 listens, and I highly recommend you give this a try. So make sure that you download the Spotify for Podcasters app, or all you have to do is go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Networking and Marketing Made Simple. Super excited about today's episode for a number of reasons. Number one, obviously, I got another interview episode lined up for you guys, and I know how much you appreciate the transparency and the vulnerability that all of my guests share, because I think most people that I have on here could resonate with the notion that a lot of people online are making it look too easy and not sharing all the ups and downs, the twists and turns that actually go into building a successful business. And the person who I have for you today, we met online on a great app called Matchmaker.fm. It is not a dating site. It's actually where podcasters go to meet. A lot of people think that because it says Matchmaker. And what I love about Jamie is that I'm all about reverse engineering. If anybody's been listening to this podcast for the last 4 years plus, you all know that Nancy and I, my wife that is, we love reverse engineering systems and doing things different, being a salmon in a world of fish. And, that's what Jamie is known for reverse engineering, planning, and systems, which is a game changer when people are looking to have a different result in the business that they're looking to grow. So we're going to talk about all that and more. So with that behind us, Jamie Milam, welcome to today's episode.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me as well. So before we get into the nitty gritty of everything that you're doing, let's go back before we go forward. And, the one question that I always like leading off with, because it just allows us to peel back the layers a little bit, is if you could look back at your journey from where you were to where you are now, can you recall a pivotal or catalytic moment that basically was the light bulb that was turned on that has set you on this path that you're now currently on that has brought you to where you are today?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because I look at it as different phases, really. The realization point for how long it's been a part of my life didn't come until more recently, actually, within the last couple of years. But really going back, I've been living out on my own since I was 15. In doing so, you can imagine a 15-year-old who has zero boundaries goes down a wrong path. And so that's exactly what happened in my life. I became a drug addict, and soon I found myself pregnant and learned that I was going to be a mother at the age of 19. And so I decided then and there that I could not continue living the life that I was if I was going to provide a better life for my son. And so I had to rebuild my entire life from a single storage tote, one of those blue Rubbermaid storage totes. And that just kind of was the catalyst for a little bit of mindset work that I didn't realize was happening at the time. It was gratitude and just all the little small steps that was progress. And then that turned into, okay, I want to go back to school because I had dropped out of college. So I wanted to go back to school. Well, being a single mom, having to go to school and work 2 jobs, what happens is, okay, I need to look at the school schedule. I need to look at my kids' schedule. I need to look at my work schedule. And next thing you know, you're managing all of these different things in one space. And so you have to kind of really, not even kind of, you have to plan purposefully in order to incorporate all of these things. Fast forward several years, and in 2015, I ended up getting married just the year before. We moved halfway across the country, started new jobs, so on and so forth. And soon I found myself in a corporate space, building out a new territory. And then I left that and went into real estate. Well, that was my first step into my own entrepreneurial space, you could say. So you had to reverse engineer those big goals and really decide, okay, well, what is it that I'm trying to earn? And how many houses do I need to sell to make that happen? And yeah, you learn really quickly that as a brand new agent, that goal is a lot bigger than what you kind of anticipated in the beginning. And so it took a lot of planning, and then it took a lot of systems, because once you gain your momentum, I feel like in any online business or any entrepreneurial space, when you gain that momentum, you can easily start to ride a roller coaster if you don't have systems in place that will keep you stable and scalable. And so a couple years ago, I started to realize that that's exactly what was allowing me to scale. And then within the last year, I started working with other entrepreneurs to help them think with the end in mind. What is their big goals, not just for their business, but for their life? Like, what are we aiming for? Where do we want to go travel to? How do we budget that in? What are the big investments that you want to make? Where are we putting the profit that you make in your business? So that way we can plan very purposefully and put in strategic action systems that will help you get there. And then that will also incorporate automation and leverage, because that is how we get to the life of freedom that we got into this for.
Well, number one, I just want to first recognize and just say thank you for being so open and vulnerable. A lot of people shy away from, sharing certain things of their life, whether it's recovering from drugs or whatever addiction that someone has, but also finding yourself as a teenager, becoming an adult, being a mother, and a lot of people know my story. And, again, I was kicked out of the nest, had good intentions when I was at college, failed out after 3 semesters, had to, re-enroll into a community college, still graduated in 5 years. But in that 6-month time span when I failed out, my father ended up getting sentenced to 2.5 years in federal prison. So I had to take over the family business, not only as a sophomore in college, as a full-time student, but also as a 19-year-old kid. So when you're kicked out of the nest at such a young age, people ask people like you and me how we've done it. There's a certain amount of resiliency and grit that you have as a kid. And I'm not saying that adults our age now don't have that same grit and resilience. It's a little bit different, but when you are kicked out of the nest and you're literally, your back is against the wall and you're staring at this hand of cards that you've been dealt, and it doesn't look good, and you have to play it anyway. And it's not like you're bluffing to try to win, but you have to forge ahead no matter what. It reinforces this armor that you end up carrying around with you in life and in business, that it does give you a little bit of an edge, because we didn't have it easy. And then I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. I get it asked to me all the time. If you could go back, would you want things to be different? And the answer every single time out of my mouth is absolutely not. Because if those things didn't happen to and for me, it wouldn't allow me to be where I am today. Now, in all of those things that you had to overcoming addiction, obviously leaning into becoming a mother at such a young age, finding love years later, getting married, finding yourself in real estate. And what I love that you said, that, and this is something that Nancy and I teach, in our group programs, we always teach thinking about the end in mind, because you can't lay a foundation of achieving certain goals if you don't have a compass to use to get to your North Star. It's just, that's how it works. In all of those experiences, being recovering from addiction, becoming a mother at such a young age, finding love later, stepping into real estate. In your earlier days, what do you feel was the biggest lesson that you learned about yourself as a person that you've been able to carry into every facet of your life that has enabled you, obviously, to become as successful as you are, but also has given you that identity and the bumps and scrapes that you've carried along the way that has allowed you to assist other people the same way?
Yeah, Scott. So in the just virtue of being transparent here, right? A couple of things that I want to mention is that the lessons learned in the earlier days, they weren't apparent. They were not, they were not like a reflection that I had at all in the earlier days, because what you described is when you're out on your own, it's survival, right? It's survivorship. And what happens with that is when you have to start being resilient at a really young age, I like to think of that as time over task. Our time over task on resilience just started way earlier than a lot of others. So that grit starts to get built way sooner, right? And so what happens then is that when you get into that survival mode, because if you're crawling from what feels like, rock bottom and this deep and dark hole, and you're just trying to get up and out of that, you start to embrace every little bit of progress that you can. And then, as we all know, in terms of entrepreneurship or any sort of 1099 business, the more effort that you put in typically generates more reward. And in some sense, that becomes addicting. So I was in medical sales prior to real estate. And it's the same thing. The more effort that I put in, the more hours, the more offices that I called on, the more accounts that I booked, the more reward I got, right? Same with real estate. Now, here's the thing is, the curtains weren't even halfway pulled open here. Obviously there are a lot of other traumas that took place early on, but on top of that, my most successful years in real estate, 2020, 2021, where market was hot, I was behind the scenes going through a divorce because I just kept going and going and going. That hustle mentality just became it really just became the distraction for the difficulties that I was having in my marriage. And the end that I had in mind that I, put on my vision boards, because I'm a huge vision board person. I was not living them on a annual basis. I wasn't making the time for them. And again, I know now, in looking back through that time frame, it's because I was using it as a distraction. And so the compass, it becomes, what is it that your values are and where are your alignment? And to be honest with you, Scott, the lessons, I would say that the lessons weren't necessarily in my earlier days. They've been in my more recent days, because in my more recent days, now I'm taking time to have the awareness and the reflection. And now I'm taking the time to say, okay, I can work 60 hours a week if I really want to and build this really profitable business, this really high revenue generated business. But am I also making the time to integrate the joy into my life that is going to make me feel like when my son moves out, because my son will turn 17 in like less than 3 weeks, y'all. And there's not a day that goes by in the last few months that I haven't thought about that daily. And so now I'm taking the time to not only take the trips with him, but also to do the things for me that keep me fulfilled in my personal life so that I can show up for others in a holistic way as a little bit more of a model for what is important. When I think about that compass, Scott, we see a lot of people that are yelling, here's what it was. And I made so much money and I turned my business into a 6-figure business in the first 3 months. And they're yelling really, really loud, but they're not talking about what does it look like at home? Are you having fun? How many hours are you actually working? Do your kids know what makes you joyful? Are you doing those things with them? And for me, for a hot minute, the answer was no. And that's not something that I wanted to continue to live through. And so even if I scale backwards now, being in that resilient and hustle mode since like a really young age, there are times that feels lazy. There are times that I'm like, oh my God, I could be doing this productive thing or that productive thing. And I have to remind myself I could be, but I'm choosing not to, because if I'm giving up, if I'm going for this thing, that I'm giving up other time that now I see is way more precious, because we really do not know what tomorrow brings. Our goals change, our priorities shift. A divorce will make that vision board look very differently. And so I think that that's important. So you asked, what were the lessons in the earlier days, and really in reflecting back now, it's to pause and not just be in survival mode, to really look at the whole picture. And my definition of success has certainly changed in the last few years.
Yeah, slowing down in order to speed up sometimes is one of the best things that one can do. So, obviously you're helping people now reverse engineer the planning and systems process. Explain a little bit more deeply. Well, number one, how did that come about and, fall into your lap? But number two, what is it that you're doing with entrepreneurs and business professionals where you are reverse engineering those two processes?
Yeah, great question. So you just said it actually in the very beginning of that question, was slowing down to speed up. That is what came to me. The first coach that I hired, my first one-on-one coach in real estate, had asked me, what is your goal next year? And I threw out this number to her for a number of houses. And she was like, okay, cool. Why is that the goal? What are we achieving with that? And I said, well, I don't know. That's what I've been told, that we should be able to sell as an individual agent before growing out our team. And she's like, okay, well, is that going to fund everything in your life, running your life and your business and the things that you're working towards on a bigger scale? And I was like, I don't know. I hadn't thought of it like that. And so that's when I really paused and took time to think about, okay, how do I want to budget this? Right. At the time I was married. My husband and I split our household bills, of course, but I knew that we were on the rocks. And so I said, okay, I'm going to create this plan with the vision in mind that in the event that we were to separate or divorce, that I could afford to continue our lifestyle completely on my own, and money would not be a factor to decide, about a divorce or not. Right. And that was the first time I really took time to financially reverse engineer my goals. I knew I wanted to buy an investment property. I knew I was going to take some time to do that. Okay, I want to do that in 3 years. All right, $300,000 investment property, potentially 25% down. Cool. All right, now let's take that, 70,000 divided by 3. Now I know how much money I need to set aside every single month, right? Well, that became something that I started to do with all of my goals, right? Funding college, putting college aside for my son, preparing for buying a vehicle, so on and so forth. So now, not to mention the taxes, the income taxes, right? Being prepared for what I needed to set aside for that. So I start a lot of the times my clients come and work with me one-on-one, and they have ideas for new offers that they want to inject into their business, or they want to start to get systematized. And, oftentimes I start with that question too. Where are we at with our goals? What's the revenue goal? And do we know why? And I am shocked every time how many entrepreneurs are not sitting down and being really purposeful about what their bigger goals are. It's, oh yeah, I want to make $200,000 next year. Okay, cool. Why do you want to do that? Well, okay, I don't know. And the next thing you know, their unit number, or whatever their sales number needs to be feels so out of range for them that they feel uncomfortable before they've even started. And I can see very clearly that their language is already setting them up for, I don't believe that I can achieve this, right? I'm not committed to it. It sounds lofty. Maybe I'll make it happen. And we're not really aligned with the goal because we don't know what the goal is doing for us. And so if we don't take time to slow down first to feel really deeply connected with what it is that we're working towards, then sure, we can put the systems in place that will get you there. But are you going to be committed to the activities, and are you going to be able to create the buy-in with your team members if you have them? And if you don't, do you know what you're pointing them towards? What is the North Star that we're all working towards? And like, how disappointed would you be if you didn't reach this goal, that goal? And if you tell me like, it would be nice. Well, then we really need to consider, like, is that part of the goal this year, right? So oftentimes we do start there, and sometimes that's a fast process, and sometimes it takes longer, and they have to go through the motions of that. And so that is part of that reverse engineering and being really aligned with the bigger picture. And then aside from that, it's, systems in place for, I think there's a system for goal planning just like that. Obviously I have worksheets that we go through. I'm also really big with task management. A lot of people have heard of Asana, Trello. I work in ClickUp. There's so many workflow automations that can happen in there that just save time, on a very small, minute basis that you wouldn't think of. But when we're switching back and forth between tasks, that's using up our brain and energy power. And I think oftentimes, like, we can automate some things that we don't realize, and we can get really organized with our calendar, because that's one of the number one things that entrepreneurs have frustrations with. They're like, I have this never ending to-do list, right? Well, when we can start automating how we assign that to a VA or some of our, outside service members, that provide us, sales funnels, things like that, social media management, it becomes a lot easier, and we save time back for ourselves.
Could not agree more. And, as we wind down, and before I ask my final question of today's episode, if someone hearing this has really resonated with not only the message of, your vulnerability and your resiliency, but the process of slowing down in order to speed up, to really recognizing one's North Star and what they want to achieve, what's the best way where people can find you, learn about what you do, and how you can assist them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I also have a podcast. It's called Determined AF, where we really do focus a lot with entrepreneurs that are within their first, 3 to 5 years of their business. And also my website, jamiemilam.com. That's going to be one of the easiest ways to see the different offers that I have, how you can connect with me, and all the other ways.
Awesome. So final question before we sign off. What does success truly mean to you?
Great question. Success for me means being present and really being able to embrace, the awareness around what is it that I'm doing and why is that important? And what am I creating opportunity for? And what am I giving up? And whenever I can answer all of those things and be very happy and fulfilled and at peace with it, then I know that I'm on my way towards, freedom and flexibility, which is what we all kind of get into this for. Those numbers are subjective, of course, right? But as long as I can achieve that while also being present and staying true and authentic to myself and aligned with my goals, then I feel like I'm hitting success every single day.
So agree with that. And, so much of what you said in today's episode, I agreed with, and just really excited that you were able to make the time and the space for this, to share all of your wisdom and everything that you're doing to support entrepreneurs and business owners, and just truly grateful for you being on here today. And I know my audience is going to take so much away from the episode, and I know a bunch of them will be reaching out to you. So Jamie, thank you again so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Absolutely. So as a reminder, wherever you are listening to this to and from, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Leave us a rating and review. Let us know what you loved most, or even what you would like to see more of, whether it's the solo episodes or the type of interviews. And also, don't forget, outside of the 2 free episodes that are dropped every Monday and Thursday of this podcast, we have launched a subscription for this podcast. If you would like to release a bonus Friday episode, it releases every Friday afternoon. It's only $2.99 a month. You can cancel at any time, and it just gives you some bonus content that I'm not sharing anywhere else but on that subscription podcast. So obviously go to the show notes to learn all about Jamie, but all about how you can start your subscription. So everyone, please enjoy the rest of your days, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much again for checking out today's episode. And if you are listening through iTunes, Spotify, wherever you are, please leave me a rating and review. Let me know what you loved, what you would like to see improved, or ideas you have for future episodes. And if you are interested in taking your business to the next level, don't hesitate to go to my website, www.scottaaron.net, where you can schedule a free discovery call with me, where I can learn more about you, your business, what you're struggling with, and how we can work together. And don't forget to check out my wife, Nancy, and mine, our free community on Facebook called LinkedIn Leads for Life. We would love to see you in there. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you, everyone, for your support. Grateful for each and every one of you.